Welcome to Divorce Law with attorney David Badanes.
Hello and welcome to Divorce Law with attorney David Badanes. David has extensive experience in divorce, child custody, child support, divorce mediation, and more. And as well, David personally handles each client with the attention that they deserve. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Beyond Romance, the financial wisdom of prenuptial agreements. Hey, David, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to chat with you.
Sounds like a great idea.
All right. Well, so let's start with the basics. What is a prenuptial agreement and why is it particularly relevant for affluent couples in New York?
Well, a prenuptial agreement is what it says. It is a contract. So people who are getting married can enter into a contract, which is called a prenuptial agreement. And that can be very, very flexible in New York State. So you can have all sorts of different terms and conditions in it. Most people put in things about, let's say I own this piece of property before I get married, and I want to make sure if we get divorced, it's going to remain my property. I tend to call prenuptial agreements divorce insurance. So just like we have car insurance and house insurance, you don't want to get in an accident with your car, but it happens. And so you have car insurance to fix your car. And when you get married, of course, you're not expecting to get divorced, but again, it happens. So by having a prenuptial agreement, it really reduces the stress and the amount of money you're going to have to spend if you get divorced, because you can resolve many of these issues dealing with assets and debts that go through the marriage, and also what some people still call alimony. In New York State, we call it spousal maintenance. So it's a very flexible agreement, and it's particularly relevant for affluent couples because, again, they tend to have assets, corporations, companies, various income streams that they want to protect, if there's a divorce. So these are things that they can, and nowadays, of course, cryptocurrency. So there's all sorts of flexibility that you can put and terms and agreements that you can put into this agreement. Pretty much the only thing you really can't do is really anything to do with child custody. That is the purview of the court. So if you put something about, if we get divorced, we'll do this for custody, you could put it in there, but a court is going to ignore it. So I usually tell people don't put it in there because it's not only a waste of time, it just muddies the water. But again, it's an agreement, a contract, and it is more relevant for affluent couples. But as we may go on, or as we continue, it's really relevant for almost anybody.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a lot of assets, and we can talk about that later.
What are some of the common misconceptions about prenups as most of us know them, especially when you're talking about the more affluent couples?
Well, again, I think the biggest misconception is the fact that it is only for some people call the rich and famous, the rich and wealthy, because many people, especially if they work for a government agency or a teacher or a union, they have very good pension rights. And those pensions build up in very quickly and have a lot of funds in them. And you can place in a prenup that my pension and the other spouse's pension as well is protected, because many people don't realize, and just let's use a teacher as an example. So a young person get a job as a teacher, they're automatically in the teacher union, and that creates a lot of funds and money in that as they keep working. If they don't protect that in a prenup, and when they get divorced, about half of that, depending on a lot of factors, but let's just say half of that would go to the other spouse. And they're like, oh my goodness, why did that happen? If they protect the pension in the prenup, then it's 100% theirs, and they can do that. So it's not just for the affluent, because many people work as a teacher, a police officer, a union, a carpenter union, plumbers union, etc. And these pensions build up. So that's the biggest misconception. That is, you have to be rich, you have to be famous or something of that nature. Not true at all.
Okay. And what specific financial considerations should individuals keep in mind as they're drafting a prenup?
Well, again, I go through with them what assets do they currently own. And again, it's a pretty extensive process, again, to make sure that they are thinking about things like a pension, a bank account. Some people own cars or that they want to protect, or a motorcycle that they may have had. or inheritances or collections. People have, it's a little old fashioned nowadays, but people still collect baseball cards or all sorts of different things that want to protect. And many people had these all sorts of type of collections. So those are the kind of assets I want to make sure that they think about and that we can place into the agreement to make sure that, again, it is protected again in the divorce. The other half of that equation is many people want to deal with debt. They want to say, basically, you pay your debt, I pay my debt. And we can do that as well, because again, in a divorce, that can get very messy. We'll put it that way. So again, that's another thing that we can take care of.
Okay. Can you talk about the implications of property division in New York and how a prenup can clarify those terms?
Well, as I kind of already mentioned, so typically when you get married, the general rule is everything is a marital asset. Okay. And even though that pension may have existed at least a little bit before you got married, the minute you get married, all the other pension benefits you're building up while you're married is a marital asset. So again, you can protect that. The same with a house. If you own a house or inherited a house and you have it before marriage, you'd certainly get a credit, let's say. But if you put more money into the house, you refinance it, you take a home equity loan, you do all sorts of things to it, that your spouse could say, wait a minute, now I should get 50% of the house, even though you owned it beforehand. And again, a prenup can say, nope, this house at 123 Main Street, no matter what we do during the marriage, it's going to be my asset 100%, again, if we get divorced. Those are the two major things: a house, real property. Oh, I guess also corporations, a little less because the laws change a little, but if you own a company or corporation, you want to make sure that your spouse isn't going to have some part of that. You could put that in the prenup as well.
You mentioned things like, debt or anything like that. Is it harder to divide if the couple pools everything together? Like how is that taken into consideration if they're not like keeping separate debt?
Well, depending on what debt we're talking about.
Yeah.
Typically, credit card debt is easy because you have a credit card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it can be two people on it, but one person is primary. Okay. The other person is a user or authorized user, really. So the primary person is the one in the prenup. We could say that would pay that credit card debt. If there's a personal loan, I guess it could be a joint loan, and that could get messy again. But again, the prenup has to be very specific if it's going to take care of that situation of a joint debt, which is very rare, by the way, to have a joint debt, except in a mortgage.
Yep, mortgage, yeah.
Or
car payment, maybe.
Some very specific loans. But typically, people they think they have joint debt, but not really, because the credit cards really belong to one person. So it's not as difficult as you think it is.
Okay.
When you draft the prenup.
Okay, that's interesting. And obviously things change. People's financial situations change, their jobs change, what have you. How can they be adapted over time when there are changes to kind of keep it up?
So yeah, sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's all right.
So what we try to do is put in a sort of a catch-all or terms in the agreement. So for example, I would say something like this in layman's language: any bank account owned by Joe Smith, even if it's opened up after the prenup, would be Joe Smith's bank account. Okay. Now, what I can't prevent people, and I tell this to people all the time in a prenup, if you open this bank account and you put Mary Smith's on it, and now it becomes a joint account, I can't help that. Now you've given up half. So there's still some accounting you have to do, but most people get that. So we can take into account future accounts, future situations into the prenup by saying things of that nature, just giving you an example I just gave you. And again, let's say they're an investor in real estate. Again, I could say any real property owned by, whether it's Joe Smith, Mary Smith, or whatever, as long as they're the only person on the deed, that can be taken care of in the prenup as well, even though it's done after the prenup is signed. It is a flexible document.
Right. And I'd imagine it's all about the wording up front, right? So like if you can put in there any property we purchase, blah, 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 or like anything, somehow kind of like talking more in general terms as far as what could happen in the future.
I wouldn't say so much general terms, because again, we still have to state, but yes, in a sense, but again, specifically saying using the example, any property owned by Joe is his going forward, whether again it's purchased subsequently to the date of this agreement. So that's how it's handled.
Okay. Okay. And you could have something in there where if we purchase something together.
Well, right.
Then,
So again, people also do that as well. And again, it's, people do what, and I say it's your prenup. You could buy as long as it's reasonable and we can make it happen. Some people want to say, well, if we buy a property together and they put, just using, examples, if I put $70,000 and they put $30,000, 70-30 if we get divorced. Or they could say 50-50. They, whatever they both agree to, that's fine by me. I don't know. I'm just a drafter, I give a, but
I just work here.
I just work here in a sense, but because you have to remember, my goal is, I want them to get married. This is not where people are fighting. These are people who are in love.
Right.
They just want to make sure that if, divorce happens, that they take care of that situation. We don't want to hire an attorney that's going to be confrontational and say, wait a minute, don't do this or don't agree to that. The goal is, again, to get them married and get them to sign the agreement. So just want to make sure we point that out as well.
Okay. The word prenup, the idea of it can be somewhat controversial in a relationship. I mean, there's a lot of negativity around it, and whether it's movies, there was a big joke about it on Seinfeld, and there's like a lot of jokes and things like that. How can couples approach the conversation and not create any sort of tension?
Well, there's actually many, and I don't know the Seinfeld joke. I'm going to have to look that up now. But there's many studies that actually show that having the conversation about prenup or signing a prenup lessens the divorce rate of people getting divorced, because now they're talking about finances beforehand. Yeah. Many people who, I don't know the percentage, but certainly people who are getting married the second time, they know the value of a prenup. And they don't need to, they can have the conversation very easily because they went through a divorce without a prenup, and they went through that hardship of fighting over all these assets. So that's for those couples who are second marriages, even if it's just one of them second marriages, that's a pretty easy conversation, because they could say, well, I was married before and this is what happened, and we spent all this money fighting over X, Y, and Z. Let's prevent that. I'm not trying to, that I own this house, I have this, and I just want to make sure it's for my grandkids or whomever. And people get that. That's not, prenups are much more accepted nowadays than even 5-10 years ago, because you have, and then for people, it's their first marriage. Many times they saw their parents going through a divorce.
Good call.
And they see the heartache that, even though they may have been young or a kid, but they certainly saw what went through, at least through their eyes, all the not, like I said, the hardship and what went on. And many times those relatively young couples who are getting married, they can approach that conversation by saying, look, I saw my parents, my mother, my father, and oh my goodness, how much they fought over this house and things, and I want to prevent that. So those are the ways that you can start that conversation, by saying, this is what happened. Also, there are books out there that help people. I'm not a therapist, so if they want to get maybe a little bit better advice on that, but there's certainly books about prenups and how to talk about that. But many people don't. Just from what I just said, they know how to start that conversation.
You said that it's less taboo than it was 5 years ago. Do you see an increase in people coming to you for them?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. I wonder too if
and again, mainly because of the relatively younger couples,
right,
who are doing very well in whether it's AI or Wall Street or whatever. And again, they have significant assets, or potential significant assets, I would say,
right,
many times with this cryptocurrency and other things. And they'll tell me, yeah, my parent, my mother, my father, went through a bad divorce, and that's why I want this. So yeah.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact also that people are getting married a little later in life. Maybe they're more mature.
Right. It goes along, right? That's the same thing.
Yeah.
People especially in urban areas and other areas, at least around here in New York State, downstate, I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's certainly, my own two kids, they say, well, we're not getting married till we're 30 years old. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, people got married when they're 21, 22.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's changed quite a bit, for sure.
Right. So that, again, by the time you're 29, 30, you probably have, again, some assets or pensions or whatever.
What final advice would you give to couples that might be listening and they're contemplating a prenuptial agreement?
Well, it's going to sound self-serving, of course, but talk to an attorney. But again, really think about what you have, what you may have, and what you want to protect. I mean, for very, prenups don't cost that much compared to what it costs for a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's I charge a flat rate. I don't know what other attorneys do, but I think many attorneys do charge a flat rate when they do a prenup, so you know how much it's going to cost going in. Versus when you get divorced, you probably don't know. I mean, it could cost 10 times more, 20 times more. So that was the only advice. Again, if you're thinking about it, you're thinking getting married. Many times, couples nowadays, they plan these extravagant weddings that aren't going to happen for another year anyway. So now you have a lot of time to think about it, which actually we haven't talked about that. It's very important that a prenup is signed. It's not a hard line, black line, but it should be signed at least a month before the wedding date.
Oh.
Now, could it be 3 weeks? Of course, but you don't want it the day before or even 2 days before, because the judges, if it ever got challenged, like any contract, you could say this contract was invalid. And the typical reason people say a prenup is invalid is I had the proverbial gun to my head. He or she showed me the prenup. It was the day before. Oh my goodness, I'm getting married tomorrow. I can't cancel the wedding. I
can't not sign it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a very typical story. So if you sign it a month ahead of time, pretty hard to say that you were under this pressure of, whatever. You had time to think about it. And also you should have an attorney as well. So those are the two things we haven't talked about. So that would be another final advice. Make sure that you talk to an attorney, I would say at least 3 months before. So there's time to draft the agreement. There's time to sign it, go back and forth between the two attorneys and get it signed. Again, I say a month before, but is it 3 weeks? That's fine. Probably even 2 weeks. Anything before it's, closer to 2 weeks, I get extremely nervous. I'll tell them that's, if we have to sign it, I have people call me and they say, we're getting married in a week. Well, we can do the prenup, we can hurry it up, but I tell them the bad news, or at least the potential that a judge could invalidate it because they feel that it's being done with the, like I said, proverbial gun to the head.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Divorce Law with experienced attorney David Badanes. To connect with David, visit dbnylaw.com. And please like and subscribe our channel here and leave a review if you liked what you heard. David, it was really nice chatting with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. You have a pleasant rest of the day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.